Hello guys, this is going to be a quick video to show you the tools that you'll need and parts that you'll need to install your RogueWorx Underlever onto your KCO2 when they eventually arrive. So thank you everyone that pre-ordered for your patience in waiting for these to get made. All the kits are currently away for anodizing, so they'll be back shortly. So this is what it will look like when it's arrived, fully assembled. This is a solid state bolt that we'll also be installing as part of this video. You may already have one of these installed in your gun. We have a separate video on how to install and tune the power output and the trigger assembly with the solid state bolt, so you can look that up on our YouTube channel. These are a couple of rubber bungs for blanking off the safety hole in your trigger mech, because we'll be removing that and it's a bit of a pain to put back in, so you can just blank it off if you want to convert your gun back to semi. We have various lubes and compounds and stuff here. So this one's a gun oil, this one's a gun grease, this one's Abbey SM50, this one's Abbey LT2, and this is kind of an optional part, and this is just some blue thread locker, some Loctite. You don't really need this unless you want to be ultra over the top with your build. So tools wise, you just need a 4mm Allen key, a 2mm Allen key. These are obviously some nice big T-handle Allen keys. You don't have to have those. You could just get any old set of metric Allen keys and just get the 2mm and the 4mm one out of it. They'll do perfectly fine. I just use these because these are my everyday tools. Some needle nose pliers, and this is a 5.5mm screwdriver, or it's you can use a 5.5mm socket. It's for undoing the little tiny M3 nuts on here, so you could look for an M3 nut driver. This one I just got off eBay for about £9. I'm sure there are cheaper options. You can get ones that are like a little key ring thing that will just do an M3 nut. I highly advise getting a specific M3 nut driver instead of trying to use something like an adjustable spanner, because when you come to undo this nut here, the screwdriver fits nicely onto it. If you try and use an adjustable spanner, you will most likely scrape off all the anodizing around this part of the underlever, which will make it look quite horrible. We obviously won't be replacing that part for you, so I'd advise getting a 5.5mm nut driver. Okay. Right then, this is the KCO2 that we're going to be installing the underlever onto. It's obviously in the standard KCO2 body. It's got short barrel, flash hider, talon. This has got a heavyweight bolt in it. We've got a Vortex Strike Eagle and a spur QD mount with a riser. We've got the Judgment trigger kit, the sickle mag release, and this has got the recently released folding maple leaf stock, which is very nice. Makes the gun extremely compact. Anyway, we're going to be swapping this over to an underlever because it's currently set up for semi-auto. So first things, we're going to need to take the mag out. Fairly obvious. We're going to whip this scope off just because it'll be easier to work on the gun without that in the way. And we're going to remove the body screws. Number one. Number two. And put your safety into the middle and ease the receiver out. Put your stock to one side and get your 2mm Allen key and poke out the body pins. Trigger mech off. You can see this has got a heavyweight bolt, so pull that back. You're going to want to keep this safe, so pop the heavyweight bolt into a baggie because it's probably got some grease and oil and stuff on it. And get your needle nose pliers, and we're going to take out the charging handle and guide rod. That can go in the bag with the semi-auto bolt carrier, because we're going to be installing the one that goes with the underlever. So if I scooch that up there, and we bring in the underlever, you're going to want to get your 5.5mm and undo this nut that's holding this top piece that looks a bit like a charging handle adapter. Call this the bolt link adapter, that piece. Pop your underlever back to one side. Do not lose the M3 nut. Now we're going to want to install this as if it's a charging handle. So the way I normally do this, get the guide rod, ensure the angled part underneath on the bolt link adapter or charging handles facing forwards, and grab it with the pliers like that and go in through the window, slot the back of the guide rod in and just let it go. Okay, now you've got the solid state bolt to go in. I prefer to lube the inside of the receiver rather than trying to put it all over the bolt. So I'm just going to put a dot on my finger. I'm just going to rub this gun oil around the inside of the receiver. You can obviously do a more thorough job of cleaning and lubing this when you do your own assembly. Bit of thin machine oil inside the receiver just because it's a fast moving part. And then this bit is a little awkward, as you'll know if you're experienced with the KCO2. You're going to pull that bolt link adapter back, hold it in place, get your SSB, drop the back in, and then wiggle it until it drops into the slot on the SSB. So that is the SSB installed, so we'll just pop that to one side. We now have to do a little job on the trigger mech. We have to remove the safety because this is where the main pivot is. Now if you're a very lucky person, you can just push this out with your thumb and it will slide all the way out. If you're not a lucky person, it will get stuck, and unfortunately you will have to disassemble your trigger mech to remove the trigger. So take all the hammer and everything out so that you can punch the safety out without the trigger and the sears installed, because if it does get stuck and you try and punch the safety out with the trigger and the sears still installed, you could damage your trigger and sears, because the thing that the safety gets stuck on is the sears themselves when you're trying to remove it. So if you try and punch that out, you'll be pushing your sears sideways and it could definitely damage them or bend them. So I know, hopefully this one should just push out with my thumb, and be very careful. There is a very tiny ball and spring that will try and shoot downwards when you push this out. So let's see. Yep, so that's popped across. I'm just going to put my thumb over the top to catch the ball and spring. Here they come. There's the ball and the spring just there. And that's your safety, and it just leaves you a hole all the way through your trigger mech. We won't be needing these anymore, so we can just pop your safety and the ball and spring into a baggie with all your other spares, because in future, if you do convert the gun back to semi-auto, you won't need to reinstall your safety. Unfortunately, you can just run the gun without a safety, and the rubber blanks that will be coming with your underlever, you can just blank the holes off either side like that, just to stop any dust and dirt getting into your trigger mech. And if you want to then convert from semi-auto back to underlever, it's dead easy just to pop those rubber bungs out, but that's not what we're doing at the minute. So as part of your SSB installation, you will also have to change to the solid state hammer spring, which is a slightly shorter hammer spring that gives you a floating hammer. Again, that's covered in our other videos about how to install and tune the solid state bolt, but you should have already done that. And so now we have the trigger mech prepped and the receiver with the solid state bolt installed, so we can pop these back together. Body pins in. Right, and now we get your stock. I'm going to pop the receiver and trigger assembly back in. There we go. Now you can put your body screws back in. Big one at the front and little one at the back. Okay, that is the gun reassembled with the solid state bolt in and the safety removed. So now you can bring in your underlever. Now we have to do a few things to this. You're going to get your 2mm Allen key. I'm going to slack off these three little M3 screws so that your sliding assembly can move. And then you're going to get your 4mm Allen key, which is the same one you just used for the body screws, and you're going to undo the big nut, the big screw here, which separates the clamp on the underlever. There you go, that's the clamp. That's your big screw that goes through the middle. So your underlever's prepped to go on. Now at this stage, it's a good idea to get some metal grease. I've got this Abbey gun grease. I should have got a new pot of this, it's nearly all gone. And just work some into the holes for your trigger mech, because this is going to be the pivot point for the underlever. So a bit on there. Again, you can be more thorough and clean with this when you're doing your installation. I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes for this video. And on the other side, oh, it's going everywhere. So now we're going to position the underlever onto the gun. So line it up, and you want the threaded pin sticking out of the bolt link adapter to go through that bearing, and at the same time as the big lug goes into the hole where your trigger mech was. And don't worry about it being loose for now, we're going to tighten it all up in a second. So first you're going to want to put the clamp on the other side, like that, so it sandwiches either side of your trigger mech. Drop the big M5 20mm screw back in. Tighten that up so it clamps onto your trigger mech, and then you can see, so that now has that pivot point sorted, and you can see this bar here is moving. Now to set this properly, this is, if you were being really OCD about this, you could take those 3 screws out now and put a bit of blue thread locker on them, but I'm not going to for this video. A good time now to get the little M3 nut that we took off earlier. What I normally have is some blue tack inside the end of this screwdriver, so I can just stick the nut on there and then onto there. Now do not over tighten this nut, because you are threading it onto aluminium threads. It just needs to be finger tight. It's a nylock nut, so it's not going to come undone anyway. As soon as you feel any resistance when winding that down, you can see when the nut's fully engaged on the thread. Just stop. If you try and over tighten that, it will just strip the threads off of that aluminium piece, and then you're in a world of trouble. So to properly set this sliding bar now with the 3 screws, you want the lever all the way against the grip. So the lever's in the fully closed position, and you want to make sure that your bolt, the SSB, is all the way forward, so you can actually look into the mag well and see if the SSB is all the way forwards against the hop unit, and I can see that this one is, and the lever's in the closed position. So now you can just gently tighten down these 3 M3 screws. Again, you do not need to go crazy with these just act as a clamp to lock the bar in position. Pinch them up finger tight. We're not trying to over torque anything here. And that is it. You can see now that the underlever uses the safety as the pivot. It goes up and pulls the bolt back when you rack the underlever with your hand. Very nice. You can see this one kind of squishes into place against the grip, so it kind of locks it in position. A lot of the other underlevers, the profile goes behind the trigger guard and provides some locking force there, so each of the underlever designs is slightly different. So we can put the scope back on. It's always a good idea to rack the underlever before putting a mag in, just to make sure the firing pin is back. And that is it. You're done. underlever installed. Okay guys, before you go, one more quick note, because I know this is going to come up. The observant ones among you may have noticed that we put the underlever on after we'd put the receiver into the gun. That means if you want to take your receiver out of the gun, you now have to remove the underlever first. You cannot disassemble the gun by just taking these two body screws out and pulling your receiver out like you normally would. You do have to take the underlever back off the outside of the gun, because it will not pass through the slot that the trigger neck normally goes through. Which means you'll have to keep your M3 nut driver and your usual 4mm Allen key in your tools when you go airsofting, or just like if you want to think that you're going to be disassembling the gun at any point to make internal adjustments, because you will need your M3 driver to take that nut off, and you'll need your 4mm to undo the clamp so that you can take the underlever off the gun. You will not need to mess with these 3 clamp screws ever again, and certainly never touch that one. You should already have the 4mm Allen key as part of your standard tools, because it's the same size as your normal body screw, so the only extra tool that you will need for disassembly now is the M3 nut driver, so that you can undo that and put it back on again after you've taken the underlever off. Okay, enjoy!